So, as many of you know, there's billions of dollars in government grants, private sector incentives, and ecosystem markets that will be offered to farmers and ranchers over the coming months. It's happening soon. And it's clear to us from some research that we recently did that the frontline officers at ag lending institutions are just not ready to support their clients. Only 15% of the loan officers that we surveyed consider themselves very or extremely knowledgeable about the financial impacts of conservation practices. The knowledge that they really need to help producers make good investment decisions in conservation. But unfortunately, it's not all that surprising, since there also seems to be a lack of institutional awareness to climate and conservation issues within ag lending institutions, which hopefully is changing. But from a recent survey we did just about 2 years ago, climate risk of ag lending institutions and executives there about climate risks and opportunities, we found that while 87% of ag lending institutions expect climate change to present material risks to their business, only 24% significantly consider climate change and conservation-related risks into their major business decisions. And this is globally. When we're talking about the US, this figure falls to 8% that are significantly factoring climate risk into their decision-making. So to help fill the climate and conservation knowledge gap at ag lending institutions, EDF, Compeer Financial, the University of Wisconsin Extension, and the University of Minnesota Extension partnered together through a SARE grant, Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education grant, to develop educational materials and a training curriculum specifically for ag lending institutions and those frontline loan officers that are working directly with producers. And as part of that effort, we conducted a survey of loan officers across the upper Midwest to understand their knowledge, education gaps, and needs. And you can find the full survey report in the chat there. We surveyed 194 loan officers across Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois. And these loan officers represented all types of ag lending institutions, including the Farm Credit System, commercial banks, and Farm Service Agency. As you can see in the donut chart here, we did have an overrepresentation of FSA respondents. So the results in the survey report, that again is in the chat, disaggregates the results to respect the fact that our sample does not represent the market distribution accurately. Mailan Huang, who's recently joined our team about 6 months ago, did all of the amazing work to analyze the data from this survey, and she's going to walk us through the results. Mailan, over to you.
Thank you, Vincent. And hi, everyone. My name is Mailan, and I'm a research analyst with the EDF Agriculture Finance team, and I'll be taking you through the key findings from the survey. So let's begin by looking at the perceptions of loan officers regarding conservation agriculture. We found that many loan officers believe in the importance of conservation agriculture. As you can see here, 51% think that conservation agriculture is very or extremely important to them. Even more believe in its environmental impact. 59% think that it is very or extremely beneficial to the environment. And many loan officers in the survey highlighted the erosion reduction impact of conservation practices, as well as their risk management benefits as convincing reasons to support these practices. When we asked loan officers about the economic impact of conservation agriculture, only 15% mentioned that they believe conservation agriculture is very or extremely beneficial in the short term. However, in the long term, nearly double that percentage strongly agree that these practices improve farmers' profitability. So this shows that while there's some concerns and uncertainties among the loan officers about the financial profitability of conservation practices in the short term, some loan officers believe that these practices could ultimately improve borrowers' profitability in the long run. Now that we've understood some of the perspectives of loan officers regarding conservation agriculture. Next, we wanted to look at the actual levels of financings and support for conservation practices. As you can see here, overall, we found that 40% of loan officers are actively financing conservation practices or equipment for at least one of their clients. 24% reported that at least half of their clients are engaged in some sort of conservation practices, and just 13% of the officers we survey are involved in local conservation initiatives or programs. And these percentages also vary across different financial institution types. So, for example, farm credit associations have the highest share of loan officers currently financing conservation practices or equipment for clients, and this is followed by commercial banks and USDA Farm Service Agency. Now, given the importance of conservation agriculture to many loan officers that we talked about earlier, the gap that we see here in supporting conservation practices could be driven by many factors. And we were able to gather insightful data from the survey that we conducted to answer this question. There are a number of challenges that loan officers face in supporting borrowers' investments in conservation practices. And here are the top 3 biggest obstacles that we found from the survey. Half of the respondents highlighted the increased costs associated with implementing conservation practices as a major challenge. Now, this perceived cost barrier aligns with our earlier findings that most loan officers do not believe that conservation practices bring significant economic benefits in the short term. In addition to that, 45% of the officers we surveyed said that they were reluctant to tell farmers how to farm, and 42% said that they have limited knowledge about the financial costs and benefits of conservation investment. And this lack of knowledge and understanding about the financial implications of conservation practices could have prevented loan officers from taking more action to support conservation investment. And when we did a more in-depth analysis of loan officers' knowledge of conservation agriculture, we found significant gaps. Less than a third of the respondents think that they are very or extremely knowledgeable about the soil and water impacts of conservation agriculture. And even fewer, just 15%, feel that they are very or extremely knowledgeable about the financial costs and profits of conservation practices. And this lack of understanding among loan officers about the financial implications of conservation investment is a critical issue that agriculture finance institutions need to address. And while the underlying reasons for this could come from a lack of data about these topics or limited access to education and training resources and opportunities. And the results that we're going to share next will provide important insights that can help agricultural lenders in developing solutions for this. When we ask loan officers what information would help them better serve clients on conservation topics, here's what we found. This graph shows the most relevant information that will enable loan officers to better support clients. First, it reinforces the importance of providing loan officers with data about the financial implications of conservation practices. Loan officers in our survey emphasize the need to quantify the financial impact of conservation practices through metrics such as projected income and expenses, cash flows, and returns on investment across different sizes and types of operations. They also highlighted the value of having specialized training and education opportunities and receiving regular updates about ongoing practices and emerging data about conservation agriculture. In addition to that, information about incentives and funding programs to implement these practices can also be valuable resources. Well, in addition to gathering the right information, it is also necessary to understand which are the most trusted information sources by loan officers to provide them with timely and efficient access to those sources. And in our survey, we found that local farmers and producers are ranked as the most trustworthy source of information. 53% of the respondents mentioned that they trust them the most for information regarding the financial implications of conservation practices. And this really highlights the value of having firsthand experiences and practical insights on these topics. Besides that, university extension services, university researchers, and USDA and RCS are also considered trusted information sources. So far, I've covered the main insights from the survey. Based on these findings, there are important implications for agricultural finance institutions, and Vincent will discuss this further in the next section.
Thanks, Mylan. So it's pretty clear from what Mylan said that our survey and from some of the past work that we've done that ag lending institutions are just not currently prepared to support producers in their conservation investments and leveraging, as I said earlier, the multitude of conservation investments that are going to be coming to farmers in the coming months and years. So given this mismatch and given, as I would say, probably an opportunity for ag lending institutions to better serve their clients, to find a new way to serve their clients, we have 3 recommendations to help solve this problem and really to train loan officers on conservation so they can better serve farmers and ranchers that they work with. So the first thing is leadership at the institution level. So leaders at ag financial institutions should fill the gap that is currently facing them and their frontline staff by developing an internal conservation or overall sustainability strategy. This will lead by example and define the priorities that they will have and that their loan officers on the ground can bring to supporting their borrowers in the decisions that they have to make around conservation. So, for example, Farm Credit Services of America has created a sustainability strategy that includes 3 aspects: education, enablement, and engagement. So first, educating producers, providing them with opportunities to come learn about conservation and sustainability opportunities, topics, risks. Enablement, meaning supporting their borrowers with tailored programs and products that help them make investments in conservation equipment, in different practices. And lastly, engaging by participating in initiatives across supply chain, across key stakeholders on issues of conservation and sustainability. One place we direct you for better to understand some of the different strategies that can be implemented at the institution level to drive the internal strategy for conservation and sustainability is a climate strategies guide specific for ag lending institutions that we developed based on the survey that we did a few years ago with executives at ag lending institutions, done in collaboration with Deloitte. So the second recommendation is to, as we pretty clearly showed in the results, is to provide education and training on the financial impacts of conservation agriculture that will allow loan officers to directly support farmers they work with as they make decisions between different opportunities and different conservation investments they can make on their operations. So as part of the project with our partners at Compeer, University of Minnesota, and University of Wisconsin, we've developed some training materials and a resources page, which should be in the chat, the link for which should be in the chat shortly. And we are actually working directly with some lenders in the area to directly pilot some of these trainings and to bring that education in a way that is region specific. And as we saw from the results, that bring producers as the voices, that bring trusted voices from the local land-grant university, local food and ag companies that are providing direct opportunities incentives. And so we're building that out, piloting it with ag lending institutions, and we think that those learnings from those trainings can be used to replicate education and training for loan officers across the country using as I said, region-specific experts, knowledge, and practices that producers can really trust and learn from. And the last recommendation is that this type of education only works when you have really good data and analysis on the financial impacts that conservation practices have on local farms and ranches. So we recommend that ag lending institutions, as a great conduit of that information to farmers and ranchers, can support those local programs that are conducting financial benchmarking analysis of conservation practices. So, for example, in the upper Midwest, EDF is working with the University of Minnesota, the Minnesota Farm Business Management Program, and a host of other partners to gather cover crop financial benchmarking data across roughly 150 farms across Minnesota, Wisconsin, South Dakota, and North Dakota through existing financial benchmarking programs that have gathered financial data and done benchmarking for decades and have the trust of local farmers as a resource for understanding where they can make financial efficiencies in their operations. So there are other projects like this beyond the one that I described. For example, there's the Precision Conservation Management Program in Illinois that is gathering great information and informing other producers about the financial profitability of different practices like cover crops, reduced tillage, efficient nutrient application. So we are beginning to build out some of these strategies and resources for you as ag lenders to take up to build, as I said, first to build the internal strategies, then to train your frontline officers, and lastly, to support the enabling data and analysis. And we and other partners, depending on the region, are here to help you as you begin developing those internal strategies and the resources for your loan officers to work directly with producers on these conservation decisions that are coming to their doorsteps soon, if not already. And with that, you can also learn more about our work at EDF on ag finance and insurance at our Ag Finance Resources Hub. Their QR code is there. And our emails are here as well. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. I'm happy to make connections within the conservation and sustainability world and to have discussions about opportunities for your ag lending institutions to develop internal strategies on conservation and climate smart agriculture. So with that, that's the end of our presentations. We will look quickly at the Q&A, see where we're at. So there's a Q&A function within Zoom. Please add your questions to that and we can answer them. There are a few questions that have come in already. The first, were there any lenders from CDFIs? Yes, there were in the survey, but only a few, which mirrors the market share of CDFIs in ag lending. But CDFI, there was at least one CDFI that advised the SARE project from which this survey came. The second question that we have in here is, what is the definition used for conservation agriculture, and was integration of trees, such as agroforestry, included? In the survey report, which the link is in the chat, we provide the definition of conservation agriculture that was used in the survey, building very much off of NRCS definitions of conservation practices. The focus was mostly, given that it was the upper Midwest, focusing a lot on cover crops, reduced tillage, efficient nutrient management and application. We didn't specifically point to agroforestry. I think that fits within the overall conservation category. A few others.
I can take a question around the ROI or IRR. So even though there wasn't like a specific indications of the threshold or the benchmark kind of ROI or IRR that loan officers shared in the survey in order for conservation practices to be considered bankable, but they did mention that it is very important to have information about the financial impact, and using these kind of metrics like ROI or IRR across different types and sizes of the operation. So, for example, the Minnesota cover crop data gathering and benchmarking that Vincent mentioned earlier is one of the very useful examples and the source of data that loan officers can refer to.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question that is really important in here from Seth Harden. How do you suggest that conservation professionals approach lenders in their geography with this report and these insights? Are there immediate next steps? Absolutely. The whole point of our SARE grant with our partners was to develop the types of trainings where conservation professionals can collaborate with ag lending institutions to build out the types of training and joint learning between conservation professionals and the ag lending in the area. So please reach out to us if you're interested in engaging your local ag lenders. We have training materials from the project that can be shared with you. In general, I think sharing the highlights from this survey that we conducted with your local ag lending institution or specific loan officers that and see what are the questions that loan officers and the staff at ag lending institutions have about conservation and build the training around that. And we have a few different sessions that are built out in the training that you can pull from. And then another question from Melissa: does your organization hold conferences or in-person trainings? We do. It kind of depends on what it is. We hold a lot of workshops that bring stakeholders from across the agriculture sector together to talk about sustainability, climate issues, conservation, to come up with joint solutions. So if you have a specific conference topic, group of stakeholders in mind, don't hesitate to reach out as well. And with that, we've answered all of the questions. We hope this was valuable to you. Please visit the resources that were linked in the chat, and don't hesitate to reach out to our team if we can be helpful in any way, or if we can answer any questions specific to this survey. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you for joining.